Through the Trapdoor. I'm Emily.
And I'm Katie.
And this is our podcast where we read you Harry Potter fanfiction.
And we still drink wine.
We're drinking wine again.
Look at us go, because we're recording the same evening.
Yep.
So last week we didn't tell you what we were drinking. We're drinking blackberry from Staggering Unicorn.
Obviously from Staggering Unicorn.
Do we drink anything else? No.
Let's read some Harry Potter nonsense.
Yes.
Despite the fact that many desperate students were fighting each other for carriages back to Hogwarts, often cramming 5 on a side to get out of the rain and back to the castle, Sirius and Mimi felt a little remorse about hijacking one of these carriages and using it as a warm, comfortable hiding place to snog for a bit. Sirius and Mimi were both rather talented kissers, if they did say so themselves.
There are carriages to and from Hogsmeade?
That would be much better than walking.
Katie Bell might have not have been cursed if there were carriages to and from Hogsmeade.
Maybe she was walking from the town to where the carriages, park.
Maybe.
And so far, the experience was rather enjoyable. Although Mimi had certain misgivings about her feelings for Sirius, she had very few misgivings about kissing Sirius. And this afternoon was not encumbered with the guilt of pretenses of their relationship. Sirius, Mimi said during a brief break, just out of curiosity, she kissed him on the cheek. When did you start? And then on the nose, kissing girls, and then on the lip. Sirius replied, kissing Mimi in return, not quite sure. Not quite sure, Mimi repeated, raising one eyebrow at him. How can you be not quite sure? He considered, define kiss. Mimi laughed. What do you mean define kiss? Well, you could mean like this, he kissed her on the cheek, or you could mean different. I meant like this. Mimi replied, demonstrating. Oh, like that. Well, then, maybe if you cared to demonstrate again, it might jog some memories. They got a bit caught up in the demonstration, and it was another several minutes before Sirius attempted to answer Mimi's question. 4th year, I guess. Mimi groaned and buried her head in Sirius's chest. Never mind. Sirius was nowhere to be found. Neither were Remus and Peter. In fact, despite the dramatic number of people James said hello to in the last 5 minutes, he hadn't found anybody in Hogsmeade he felt like spending an extended period of time with. After having no luck running into people at Honeyduke's, Zonko's, or the Three Broomsticks, he made his way to Zorkon's Charmed Gift. James normally would not have bothered looking at the store for any of his friends, but there were few options left at this point, and besides, his cloak was almost entirely soaked through. Zorkon's was convenient stop, not only because of its location, but also because of the instant dry spell Mr. Zorkin placed on the door to prevent mud and puddles inside his shop.
Brilliant.
James did not encounter any of his close friends inside Zorkon's. He did, however, discover Arabella Figg in the back of the store, examining bottles of self-applying shampoo and returning them to the shelf with a certain amount of unwanted violence.
Self-applying shampoo. Oh my god.
That'd be great.
Imagine the time you would have.
Yeah, washing my hair is tedious.
You would have finished your book?
Probably. For reference to that, I've been trying to read Midnight Sun since it came out. Literally, it was delivered to my house the day that it was released. I have been trying to read it since then. I am less than halfway through because of my small human. Come now, Arabella. What did that shampoo ever do to you? James asked, leaning against the shelf, feeling amused. Arabella shot a glare at James and slammed the bottle of shampoo on the shelf. This isn't the shampoo, James. It's the channeling. I'm channeling my anger. You sound like you need a therapist. I can't help it. My mother is a therapist. Yeah, I always forgot that. Well, lucky you. She reminds me of it. Every owl she sends, she's always trying to analyze me too. And she always has something to say about Mundungus, of course. Arabella continued, seizing another bottle of shampoo with such force that the cap nearly popped open. At the moment, I'm not sure I disagree with her. James's eyebrows shot up. Having a bit of a row with him? You could say that, Arabella replied, turning the bottle around to examine the ingredients label. You could also say that he's selfish, stupid, immoral, sodding, idiot.
I mean, fair.
Well, you could, but then you could also say that about anybody. Arabella shot him a look and then returned to the ingredients on the label. Lily showed up in the 4th floor room hidden behind the dragon tapestry several hours ahead of schedule. She laid her rain-soaked robes on the floor in front of the fireplace to dry. Or she could use magic.
Magic is a thing.
and curled up on the couch, huddled under a heavy, soft blanket for comfort. Things were not all right inside her, and she felt that she needed to sort out her feelings before she saw James. Her thoughts eventually overwhelmed her, tears leaked out of her eyes. Lily had cried so often, so recently, that she no longer bothered wiping away tears until she was sure that they were finished. It seemed like a waste of energy to wipe away tears off her face over and over and over again. By the time her frustration had worn itself out, the whole room was a blur of shattered, distorted colors, and there was no sense left in the world. That's why when the gray lady floated through the wall, Lily did not immediately detect her presence, and therefore jumped and fell off the couch when the ghost spoke to her.
Where the fuck did the gray lady come from?
Out of the wall.
Alright, fair. She is a ghost.
Lily Flower, why are you crying? Lily, from her position on the carpet, hastily wiped her eyes and looked up at the gray lady. Oh, lady, I was just thinking, and I guess my emotions got the better of me. Must have been very sad thoughts. So many people seem to be having those lately, Lady said, sounding a bit downtrodden herself. Lily climbed back onto the couch, slowly thinking. Well, that makes sense, though, doesn't it? Sad thoughts. So many things to be sad about nowadays. It's been a long time since I've seen anything terrible enough to penetrate the walls of Hogwarts. This is the happiest place I've ever seen. That's why I decided to stay. Decided? Lily repeated. She wasn't entirely sure what the gray lady meant, but expected the comment had something to do with the lady's ghostly state. She'd never really considered before how people came to be ghosts. It had never entered their mind that there might be choice involved. Do you mean you choose to be a ghost? Well, yes, I suppose. I was too afraid to see what lay beyond, so I decided to stay here, because here was comfortable and happy, and it was the only thing I knew. Lady paused for a moment and smiled faintly. I've never been a big fan of the unknown.
That makes me think. The gray lady literally died in an Albanian forest, and she is attached to Hogwarts.
I don't think that the ghosts of Harry Potter are stuck where...
I think they choose where they live,
yes,
and haunt and everything like that. That's clear by the Death Day party that they can kind of come and go as they please. But is like Myrtle stuck there? No, because she said she haunted that girl for years.
Mm-hmm. She just chooses to live in the U-bend of a toilet. Which, quite frankly, is very, on brand for Myrtle.
I mean, true, it is.
James did not come soon enough, and Lily lost the battle with her subconscious. Her non-waking mind took over, and she surrendered to darkness, sleep, and dreams. Lily's eyes fluttered open and focused on a cheery fireplace. Someone had covered her with a blanket while she slept, and she felt pleasantly warm both inside and out from the gesture. She smiled and sat up slowly, stretching, and was at this point that she noticed something funny. Despite her desire to stretch, it was not her stretching her body. It was not quite her smiling either. And whatever she happened to be wearing, it was not hers. Her clothing was ungodly tight as she stood up. She felt weight of layers of heavy fabric fall about her legs. Though she desired to look down, she found she could not. Instead, her eyes focused on other things about the room. It was at this point that Lily realized she was not in the fourth floor room behind the dragon tapestry, nor was she actually awake. She was dreaming. It was a very strange dream, too, as despite the fact she knew it was not real, it still felt completely real.
Those dreams wake me out.
Yep. The room around her was beautiful, well-furnished, and rightly proportioned, and was also not any room she'd ever seen before. Often in dreams, her mind presented her with rooms she'd seen before. They altered themselves, whether over the course of a few minutes or seconds. Unfamiliar places did not stand solidly in Lily's subconscious. Fortunately, Lily did not have to wonder much longer as the dream began fading. She fell back into unconsciousness for several minutes before she drifted back into the world. Her sense of touch tuned into the world first, and she felt a warm hand on her shoulder and warm lips brushing her cheek. Lily opened her eyes to see James hovering over her, lips now inches away from her cheek, hand on her shoulder, which he'd considered covering with a blanket. "Hello, James," Lily mumbled, and James jumped slightly. "Did I wake you? I didn't mean to." "No," Lily said, shaking her head. "At least I don't think so. It's all right, though. I don't mind." "Are you sure? If you want to go back to sleep, you can." "No," she replied, sitting up slowly. She looked around the room and stretched, relieved to discover she was back in control of her body, and in fact that she was in her body. "Oh, man," she said as James sat down next to her. She began fiddling with her necklace absent-mindedly and stared at the fire, shaking her head in disbelief at the dream she'd just had. "What?" James asked. "I don't know. I was just having the weirdest dream." All of the 7th years in the OR training program were being bombarded with homework. This was tough on James, Sirius, and Naomi Collins, especially as they were all heavily training for the upcoming Quidditch match. Lily couldn't imagine having Quidditch practice 3 nights a week, in addition to the enormous pile of homework the students had to complete each night. It usually took the head girl 3 hours to finish it all, and that was without distractions or interruptions in the form of head girl duties. Currently, Lily was pulling double duty as James wasn't in any condition to fulfill his head boy duties. So maybe she did have some idea of what it was like to have Quidditch practice after all. Though, of course, her pursuits as head girl were not nearly as muddy as James's pursuits of Quidditch. Melody walked to Hogsmeade with a bag full of merchandise and several pockets full of galleons. Her plan, so far, working miraculously well. Her earnings, of course, weren't nearly enough to pay her uncle off, but they were quite large, and she had several appointments in Hogsmeade today, which she hoped would increase her earnings considerably. She stopped first at the post office to send off some merchandise to faithful customers, then proceeded to Hogshead for her first appointment. Melody could tell from the minute she stepped in the door that today was not going to go quite as she had planned. Part of this was because her appointment seemed to be engaged in a transaction with someone else. Part of this was because as soon as she set foot in the pub, someone grabbed her arm rather harshly and steered her in the direction she did not want to be steered. Mostly, however, she felt that her plans were going to go awry because when she stepped into the pub, she saw her uncle waiting for her in the back of the room by the staircase that led to a private upstairs.
Dang.
She was like sitting back on the couch and all of a sudden sat up dramatically.
Y'all, I drank half a bottle of wine. I can still drive myself home, but man, is this story more dramatic?
She's fully reclined again against the couch.
I have no idea where we are in the story. I'm trying to find my spot.
It's quite a ways down. One of her uncle's many servants grabbed her arm and half dragged her up to the staircase.
Rude.
From this point, Melody's uncle took a hold of her arm and pulled her up the staircase behind him into a small room containing 1 table and 2 chairs.
Rude.
He tossed her in the general direction of a chair, which she nearly fell over, and commanded her to sit. Melody, due to a lack of better options, obeyed and let her stomach tie itself in knots as Hans paced back and forth across the room in a rage, though Melody had no idea why. After a few minutes of pacing, Hans stopped, turned, strode to the table, which he leaned over so he could glare at Melody properly. Melody sat in her chair stiffly, looked him in the eye, unwilling to listen to him, but not feeling as though she had another option. "You idiot, girl," he yelled finally. Melody's hands clenched the side of her seat, but she did not move except to blink and elected not to speak. "Fake watches, used shoes, charm jewelry, how stupid are you?" A lump blossomed in Melody's throat. How did he know? How did he find out? She still didn't speak, knowing now that if she did, she would cry. She couldn't bear to display such weakness in front of a figure so cold and enraged as her uncle. "Did you honestly think that would work? Did you think that you could make enough money back to pay me back? What were you thinking getting involved in something illegal anyhow? Do you want to be thrown in jail? You wouldn't be much good to your family in jail now, would you? Or perhaps you would like to end up dead. Melody, does that sound like more fun to you? People involved in illegal trades aren't all that nice, you know. You mess up once, they'll have no problem eliminating the person who caused them the problem. Did you stop and think of that before you rushed into all this ill-conceived nonsense?"
First of all, You are putting her into all of this ill-conceived nonsense anyways, so shut the fuck up, Hans.
Melody swallowed and averted her eyes from her uncle's. Melody, I don't know what game you think you're playing at, Hans hissed into Melody's ear. But right now, you are gambling with people's lives. Because she's selling fake watches and shoes.
She's not gambling with people's lives. Oh, maybe her family's because of, Hans's threat.
She sat and listened to her uncle scream and yell about her stupidity, her worthlessness, her inadequacy, and her incompetence. She sat and stared at the wall until she could tune him out. Then and only then was she able to think clearly enough to realize two things, neither of which she knew she'd realized until her uncle was done yelling at her and she left the Hogshead and ran back to Hogwarts and collapsed on her bed sobbing. First of all, Hans needed her. He wasn't just threatening her because he thought she was stupid. Honestly, he needed her. She'd realized subconsciously that if everything in Hans's life was running smoothly, he would not be so concerned about Melody's actions, legal or illegal, nor would he care whether she'd gotten thrown in jail or not. He must be in desperate need of money, Melody reasoned. And as far as I can tell, and as far as he can tell, I'm the only way he can get it. Hans's fortune was dwindling. He was running out of options and resources fast, and the only way he could think to lift himself out of this mess, and quickly, was to marry his niece off to the richest bastard he could find as soon as she came of age. This didn't mean that he wasn't serious about killing Melody's family. The only person he really needed was her. So even though Melody wasn't in any direct danger, it didn't mean she was off the hook. He still expected her to go through with this plan, and she still expected he'd hurt her family if he got the chance. Although this was sick and twisted that made Melody want to hurt her uncle more than ever, it finally made sense, and understanding what her uncle really wanted was a huge asset to Melody's plan. Of course, she didn't really have plans until she understood what her uncle wanted, but as soon as she'd come to the conclusion what he needed was her to rebuild his fortune, she came to a second realization, and as soon as she came to that second realization, she smacked herself in the head several times and banged her head against the wall once for good measure. Melody was in love with Sirius. She knew it, Lily knew it, James knew it, and somewhere in the little corner of Sirius's heart, Sirius probably knew it too. This would have had no impact on Melody's life or her bastard uncle's plans except for one simple, undeniable, highly wonderful fact. Sirius Black was loaded.
Finally.
The Blacks were rich. Hell, they were beyond rich. They were rich for 15 generations back on Sirius's father's side. And Melody, if she played her cards right, might be able to marry that. Of course, currently there were several problems with this plan. For one, Melody had told Sirius that she didn't love him. For another, Melody was no longer sure how Sirius felt about her. He still loves you.
It's clear he still loves you.
Most of this, of course, was caused by a third problem in the plan. Sirius was already in a relationship. I'm pretty sure that if you went to Sirius and were like, Sirius, I was wrong, I love you so much, he'd be like, bye, Mimi.
I'm here for you, Melody. I love you.
Yep. Melody stayed up most of the night, pacing, thinking, occasionally crying with relief, and then came to only one conclusion. She was definitely, completely, hopelessly gone over Sirius Black, and that, for what felt like the first time in her entire life, was okay, and in fact, was more than okay. It was perfect.
Finally, she's realized what we have known all along.
The end.
Okay, we'll see you next week, I guess.
We will see you next week for the start of Chapter 16.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us on our journey through the trapdoor.
You can leave us a review on Facebook or Apple Podcasts. It would literally mean the world to us.
Or you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at TheTrapdoor16.
Or if you have any longer thoughts, you can shoot us an email at throughthetrapdoor16@gmail.com.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you again next week.
See you next week.